Good evening. This is the Wine of Life podcast. I hope you had a Merry Christmas and Happy New Year to everyone. Hopefully this year will be better than the last. What we're going to do tonight is still continuing to focus on the incarnation. And I know we just finished with Christmas, but I think there's some important points about the Christmas story that I find really intriguing and something we should dig into a little bit deeper. And that is the idea of Christ being the new creation. And so when we're talking about Christ being the new creation, what is happening when we read about the various stories going on with the birth of Christ? And so we'll look at two of the stories and see how the new creation starts to reorient everything about creation up to that point. And so the first story we're going to look into is Luke 2, about 8 through 15. And that's the story of the shepherds. And the shepherds are there in Bethlehem, and then all of a sudden these angels come. And these angels start singing, and, peace on earth, goodwill towards men, and speaking about the Messiah that is born. And they're singing, and they're pointing to what the men need to go and worship. And that is very, very significant with regards to the way that the Jewish people would have viewed angels and the way the Jewish people viewed man. Now, in Galatians 3, 19 and 20, it says that the angels were the mediators between God and Moses to give Moses the law. And we see this in, if we read, Deuteronomy 28 through 32, I believe it's in 32, you'll read about angels, 10,000 angels being there on Mount Sinai with Moses. So the Jews viewed the angels as being that mediator between them and God. God was invisible. He was transcendent. He was beyond them. They were in contact with his angel. Moses sees his angel in the fire at the burning bush. The angel walked with them in the fire and in the cloud, the pillar out in the wilderness. And so the idea of seeing God was beyond the Jewish people. They viewed God through these visions of angels that various people had over time, whether that be the prophets or David or whoever else. So that's how they viewed angels. And so in this now, angels, of course, being made a little greater, a little higher than men, you now have a man who they are telling to go and worship. You now have a man who actually is also God, who is now going to be the mediator between the rest of mankind and God. He was going to be a representative of man. There is no more angels to mediate between us. Now, there are mediating powers and principalities, but now we're seeing in the new creation, right? So in the beginning we have the light being made, and as the first thing, and the last thing being made is man. But now we're seeing that there's this altering, a reorientation of how we're supposed to view man. Man being that last creation is now being elevated above the angels now. And this is talked about in Hebrews, which is discussing a psalm from Psalm 8, when it talks about what is man. And man is now being elevated beyond the angels, because man in the new creation is going to be transformed by the Spirit of God in order that we may now see the face of God, and in seeing him we will be as he is. And so they were telling the shepherds, go and see this man who is God, the new creation, and see what you are going to become, right? So they're telling them to go and worship man. These are what the angels are telling them. And we see from now on, angels taught the people in Israel. Angels came and protected the people in Israel. But if we read in Ephesians 3, 1 through 10, it says that the church now, when it gathers, it actually teaches the powers and principalities above. And we find out at the cross, if we read Colossians 2, we see that Christ actually lorded over the fact that he had defeated death, that he had nailed the trespasses against mankind to his cross, and he lorded over the fact that he as man had defeated death and that he was over them, and that all things made, both visible and invisible, were made by him and for him. And so Christ becoming man reoriented the way that the nation of Israel would have viewed the created order, right? They would have viewed angels still as being created above man, but now man is being elevated above the angels because a man is now sitting at the right hand of God. A man is now interceding on behalf of the saints before God, and that is the man, Jesus Christ. So there in 1 Timothy 2, it says that there is now one mediator between man and God, and that is the man Jesus Christ. So him being truly God and truly man reorients and changes and transforms the order that man was in with regards to creation. And so that's a major aspect of the new creation, that man is placed in a different position because God condescended down to him in order to transform him. And we find when Isaiah was in the throne room in Isaiah 6, the seraphim were covering their face. They were covering their face and singing, "Holy, holy, holy." When we get to Revelation 22:3, we find that the promise of God that we find in the Psalms, like Psalm 17 and Psalm 27, that we will in fact see the face of God. And so this is also a promise in the Beatitudes even. Those who are pure of heart, blessed are those who are pure of heart, for they shall see God. So man was going to be able to see God. And so the new creation allows for that to happen, the new Adam. And those who were born of the Spirit of God have the power to become the sons of God. Those who have received him, according to John 1:12, we will be able to see God. So we will be placed above the angels. And so there's a reorientation with regards to the people of Israel in that event, because the angels are pointing to a man to go and worship. So there will be no more mediation between angels as the mediator between man and God. The second story of this is the Magi in Matthew 2, 1 through 12. And there's so much mystery to this, and it's so interesting. Most people think they're probably Zoroastrians or, the sort of the stargazers, the astrologers of the East. But what's interesting again is that we're seeing the created order being light, right? Angels are beings of light. They are ministers of flames of fire. And the stars are lights. And so again, just like in creation, we start with light and we move towards man, which was the last thing created. And here, these people who worship stars, who gazed upon the stars to tell them of things. Now, we're kind of divorced from this thought, because for us, technology is a mediator between nature and us. So the movement of the stars, the movement of the skies, the sun and the moon, those things mattered a whole lot to people's survival in the way that they lived. They were the divine spheres. There was a tune, and there were people who believed they could hear that tune, and they thought that they understood the times of things. And over time, of course, they ended up deifying these things. So the sun was the Lord over the day, and the moon was the Lord over the night, and so they became gods. So these people started worshiping the created order in the heavens, and that dictated how things happen on earth, which is true. The way your crops grow, the tides with the moon, all that stuff, when the rains come down, all that stuff then became deities to these people. Now, of course, other people started deifying other creatures on earth, lower forms of worship, but these people still look to the stars, they still worship the stars. And what's so interesting about this is that the star is teaching them to go and worship a man. the star is leading them to the king that they are supposed to worship. So we see a reorientation of the Jewish people with the angels telling them to go, that their king has been born. We now then also see a reorientation of the nations who worship the creation rather than the Creator, because they had not been given the revelation, the lively oracles of God that Israel had. And that creation, just like it says in Psalm 19, that the creation actually sings forth the glory of God. That creation is now teaching them to go and worship this God-man. And so there's a reorientation of that the created order would be lorded over by man, that man was made to have dominion over all of this. God had made him in his image, and his image, who is Jesus Christ, would be the Lord of all of this. He would be the King of Kings and Lord of Lords. And so there's a reorientation for the nations. They are not to worship the created order. The created order had pointed them to this man, just as the angels, who were also part of the created order, were pointing them to the Jews to this man. The creation itself, the star, the light, was pointing them to this God-man who was Jesus Christ. And them being faithful to that calling, to that star, followed it and ended up there where they were supposed to be in the first place. So I just think that that's very interesting about how Jesus, being the new creation, the new Adam, or the last Adam, that the created order was being reoriented, both for the nations and for Israel, that there was going to be a different way that they were going to see the angels. There was going to be a different way in which the nations were going to see the created order from now on, that they were going to have to bow down to the creator of all of that. Because as it says in Colossians 1:15 and 16, that Christ, being the image of the invisible God, made all things. Right? All things were made by him and for him. So the stars were made for Christ. The angels were made for Christ. So I just think that's really, really an interesting part of the new creation of Adam. And I wanted to talk about that as we go into the new year. And hopefully we'll think about renewal, about spiritual renewal, about spiritual transformation, about what being a new person in Christ means. It's a reorientation of your whole life. It's the defeat of sin. It's the defeat of that which is old, the destruction of that, and a reorientation of everything that was old. So just as the nations had to change their view of nature and what nature meant and reorientate that to worship Christ as the creator, and the Jews had to do that with angels, we now have to do that with our own personal lives as well. We have to start reorienting ourselves. I hope I'm saying that right. Trying to change the way that we live our lives, with Christ being at the center of that, and realizing that all of the things around us are in fact temporal, because he was the maker of all the things, whether they be visible or invisible. So that's the episode to start off the new year, talking about the new creation. Really look into that. I really encourage you to look into that and to study it, that Christ being the new creation, the beginning of our new creation, which will be fulfilled ultimately with the new heaven and new earth. But that's what I wanted to start with. I think that's really interesting. And just those episodes with the shepherds and with the Magi are just amazing events, just odd, strange events that only God really could do. So God bless you, and I hope you have had a great Christmas, and I hope that the new year is good for you too, and I'll see you soon. Bye.